For that single, I mean, and if you can as well, Billy, if you can say, because obviously the audience don't know what we're talking about, the end of the single.
Whose idea was it to put it out as a single, or was it?
Whose idea was it for the song? I mean, obviously, if you say Vienna,
people
construct the album.
Yeah.
If you're saying it, could you put it in context? Vienna, the single. What?
Vienna is the single. Well, the way it was, like I say, was we'd been together since August 1979. Like I say, we'd gone off, rehearsed some of the tracks we wanted from the previous lineup, like Dislocation and Quiet Man, Slow Motion, and very quickly wrote 3 or 4 mid-tempo rock tracks and Mr. X, the more electronic drum machine stuff. But we introduced a lot of drum machine into the previous material as well, like Quiet Man and stuff. In fact, we used to start the set off with the drum machine and go straight into Quiet Man. Yeah, so we'd got that under our belt, and like I said, we did a tour in America to get away from Britain, to just get the band going, you know. And when we came back, we started rehearsing again. We had a bit of a downer on because we expected to get a deal from America pretty much straight away. Must have been naive. And most of them were on holiday. No, and so we were a bit sort of like, and we started up again in February at Easy Eye off Caledonian Road. Freezing, cold place, you know. No soundproof. You could hear every other band in the place. Easy Eye, I love it. I don't know if it's still going. And I just went in and said, I think we should do a ballad. Let's, you know. And I knew that because we'd got confidence of playing live and we'd done these other tracks, it was the right time to say it, you know. We'd mastered not mastered, but we'd done the other kind of style of the rock track with the drums and bass and the electronic. So it was met with, yeah, okay. And I'd got an idea about it, you know. And I was drawing, all of us were drawing in the 80s from a lot of material we'd come up with in the 70s, really. And it was finding its home, you know. Whereas in the 70s it was all a bit here and a bit there and, you know, jumpy, you know. So it had this very sparse chorus, and I mean, I can actually remember saying, you know, to Warren, let's go with the heavy, sparse drums bit, and he knew what I meant straight away, you know. And Chris, it was left to do what he did. He was kind of a light guy for a bass player, really, space cadet, and he knew he was going to come up with something, you know. And that's how it happened, and we were going along in this sparse thing, and then, like I said, Chris turned it down, and I was like, hang on, is that right, going into a chorus? You know, you think that we were crafting songs, you know, that was the time, and in some ways that's what I mean by the move to the right. It was a little bit like, let's kick out all the messing about now and get back into doing songs. But like I say, I was also pushing for the music side as well. So we did that, and we started doing this thing between B flat and F, which is a strong bass line. I started bunging in a bit of G minor in there, dum, 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 you know, great, blah, blah, blah. Textural. We were into textural sort of sounding things, which I'd found when we were in America. We were doing Dislocation, and we used to jam it. So we used to go on and at the end, and I actually found myself doing this thing. You know, we were into sort of like a textural thing. I can't sing, can I? But okay, so we did that, and we dropped down on this F chord, oh Vienna, and then when he went dum for the verse again, back up a fifth. I mean, I thought that was actually quite seriously intriguing, and it was like, wow. You know, it sits up by itself, you know. So it goes along like that. And then I put in that dum 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 dum. Took it from jamming, you know. Because you've got to remember that we'd done quite a few gigs, and what was good about Midge coming in as well, he'd been doing quite a few gigs, like with the Rich Kids as well, and he'd built up his band in Scotland. I've forgotten the name of the band. Before Slick, it was called something else. He came from the live sort of thing, so I mean, basically, you know, that it was good. It came through a live thing. I mean, people might not think that when they think Vienna, but it was fresh out of doing this tour. And but like I said, the middle section, I had to just say, look, can we just leave that, you know, guys? And they were like, yeah, sure. But they just did. And we tried it at Electric Ballroom, and we were actually got a few record companies down there from the English. And it was a very risky thing to do, but we were also up for going for it. It was a going for it sort of thing at time, you know. And so we performed it there. Midge got the beginnings of a verse kind of thing. I can't actually remember whether he got the Big Vienna. I don't think he had then. And I just improvised the same sort of doom through there. But like I said, when we went to record it, I wrote the whole thing out. You know, I mean, I write music, I can score music, and I just didn't do it because my introduction to rock was improvisation and getting away from all that. But it really was about this time that I was actually coming back and having come a bit of a full circle and started introducing this kind of thing. I used to write stuff down a fair bit, and you know, that's how it came.
How did Vienna come about? Where did the actual band, the name of the track come from?
Oh, right. Well, it was influenced by Conny Plank, our German producer, because like all our stuff, we used to do it as music, and then the vocals used to go on last. So we'd got this backing track, and it was. Do you want me to talk about the?
No, just kind of why did you pick up? I mean, obviously he influenced you by the Strauss.
Why that? I think it's because it was to him. He was a German guy, and he was talking about the way Vienna was at the end of the last century, the 18th century. It was a time when the Habsburg Empire was going into decline. And you've got all this wealth there, and Johann Strauss was riding it, you know, and it was a fantastic place. And then it all went a little bit sour. He was telling us about this to help us get a mood on it, a mood on the track, to give some angle to classical weirdness, because that was my contribution, classical weirdness, really. And it could go right or it could go badly wrong. And this thing needed directing. It was different, you know. And he just put it was going somewhere anyway, but he just put his mark on it by saying, imagine this decadence going wrong, like in Vienna at that time, and out went Johann Strauss, like, I don't want any more of this. It's living a kind of a lie. Imagine people going like this to his music when really it was all in the background, everything was going wrong. He came off the stage. And then to stage left was this other guy called Max Rieger. We put his picture on the back of the single. And he struggled, as we put it on the back of the single, to maintain Viennese morale or something. And he played this piece of music, and it was over-embellished crap. It was just to try and lift people up, but it was actually sickly, it was desperate. And of course, he'd got his own political ends in there, and he wasn't a very good composer. I mean, there's all these kind of tales about this, isn't it? Like the Amadeus thing, that guy ripping him off and all that, you know. And so when I listened to this music, he influenced us in playing it in a certain way of actually this decaying decadence. I didn't go too hot for the sickly bit. You know, I didn't start doing all these ridiculous over-embellished arpeggios. But, I mean, I'd been playing violin very heavily. I'd been playing it even using feedback. I played a Fender Solid violin, which used to take people's heads off. And so it's like, what do we do with this? You know, it's like... And it made me play in a very sweet, almost sickly, a lot of vibrato. Because you've got to remember, I hadn't done classical music... for ages, since I left college. I went to college, you know, and so it had to kind of, we were going in this direction, and he just helped us put a, and then of course it ended up going on to the lyrics. Midge picked up on it, and I wasn't in the room when they were doing the lyrics, you know. We used to quite often kick everybody else out when we were doing our own bit, and you get these nervous eyes opening the door every few minutes, you know, like, is this turning into a hippie band? You know, and it's like, give me some space. So we used to give each other space, but go in there and annoy each other every now and again, so it didn't get too far away from what we were doing, you know.
Were you surprised at how big it was as a single?
Completely surprised. And in fact, it's really hard for me to even go back now and remember what was going on at the time. Because I was actually one of the persons in the band that was getting really upset about it being released at all. I suddenly decided that I didn't want it ridiculed or something. So, I mean, it shows how wrong I was, doesn't it? I was incredibly surprised, you know.
And what about the video? How did that come about?
That was, we were talking to Russell Malkai was the guy that was up for doing the video at the time, and again he just tuned into what it had, an angle, didn't it, you know, which is, let's face it, it's a video maker's producer's dream, and he really did an excellent job on it, you know.
Where did you shoot the video?
We shot it at a real mixture. The stairs at the end was at Kilburn, the old broken down Kilburn place, you know, just on Kilburn High Road. We shot it some swanky apartments, those other bits, I can't remember where that was, down near Harrods or somewhere. And the horse bit, that was in front of the bit in Covent Garden, you know, because one of the clubs after the Blitz was actually moved to just there. And then the rest was in Vienna.
And I've seen the top. Going through
Oh, in the graveyard in Vienna, that was a buzz. To go to all those like Beethoven and Brahms and stuff. It's a buzz for us, you know. We just flew over on this little plane. It's great.
I've been looking through lots of archives from Magic, and I saw an interesting performance of that song on Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
Midge wearing a cap and a chain.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said somewhere. I thought you were going to say some other band. It's like, oh yeah.
Of Midge wearing like a cap and a chain. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
The imagery. What was going on?
Was that on Top of the Pops? Oh, that was yeah. We did a gig at the end of, I think that might have been at the end of '81, when it was just to show a Top of the Christmas one, was it? I think it was, yeah. And they drag out everybody at the end of the year to do a Christmas Top of the Pops. And we'd just done a gig at the London Coliseum, the Opera House place, and Chris had got dressed up in all this kinky leather gear, and Midge was there with the kilt and everything. We were just dressing up and larking around, you know. And yeah, I remember Midge nicking that gear for that performance for the Top of the Pops.
What about how upset were you that it never quite made it to number one?
Upset-ish. I was trying not to get too involved in it, you know. It was like, it seemed strange. I was pleased to be there because I was getting very involved in all that and a bit jealous in 1979, you know, seeing Gary Newman. I mean, Gary wanted me to join his band, and he showed me all the early demos, like of Cars, and I was, you know, to see Cars suddenly in American. I think the album went to number one in America, and here it was double number one here. So if you're not careful, you can get really into all this, you know. So I was disappointed, but I was trying to stop myself from getting too intense about it, the competitivity of it. And I was just pleased that we'd got some success. I'm a bloody liar. No, I probably was really ecked off at the time.
And do you remember what held you off at number one?
Yeah, it was that Joe Dolce thing, yeah.
Was that?
Well, that just about sums it up, doesn't it? I mean, you've got to have a sense of humour, haven't you? You know, I mean, it's not about your quality of music just because you didn't get to number one. It's just a laugh, the singles chart, isn't it? You know, something comes along. I mean, I thought it was dead funny, that "Shut Up Your Face," you know. Great chorus. I wish we'd come up with it. I mean, it just puts it in. It puts it all in perspective, doesn't it?
Sure. After that, obviously, big success. Got the deal at Chrysalis. Things started looking up. What was going on there? Tell us a little bit about. Again, the chronology is very difficult for people to keep in mind what you're doing when.
Well, what happened? You see, when we did Vienna. When we wrote Vienna, sorry, that was in early 1980. Yeah, we got the deal. We put Vienna and Visage out later on that year at the usual time, like September time, and they did kind of okay. Chrysalis whacked it straight up to number 14, and I think I was absolutely elated that I was close to going insane with happiness, you know. And we were rehearsing at the time, it was brilliant, but then it kind of dropped down, and Visage went and did okay, but didn't do particularly brilliant. And I think Fade to Grey was the first single. But what happened was, it was all belated, because Vienna came out the following early next year. Went big later. In fact, went big when we were having to write our next album. This is early 1981, and also they'd got it out in Europe by then, because it came out in Europe afterwards. You know, this thing you do Britain and then Europe. It did okay in Britain, but then in Europe, Visage, it just went massive. So we were going over to Connie Plank to do our second album, and we're looking in the charts and stuff. It's like, welcome to Germany, guys, you know, and you are now double number one in France and Germany, and it wasn't Ultravox, so, you know, it was a bit like, must have hecked off Chris and Warren a little bit. And we were. Fade to Grey was number one, and Visage the album. So it all happened, it was kind of a bit weird, all that, really, because we were there to try and write another album, and the second one was not helped by touring, so it was a bit like, ooh, you know, God, and trying to keep balanced about it, because Vienna caused Ultravox to take off all over the place as well, you know. So it was like really, really exciting. It was brilliant, but it was difficult, because we had to do not just an Ultravox album that year. As soon as we'd finished that, we had to start doing a Visage album as well.
When Vienna went big, did you think, right, I'm going to concentrate on Ultravox now, I'm going to keep all my good stuff for Ultravox, and Visage as a side project?
A bit, yeah.
Elaborate on that, because obviously you don't want to hear my words, so if you could say that, or, you know, relay that.
Yeah, I did really. It was a little bit like, we've ended up getting everything here, you know. Don't let the edges. I started getting a little bit defensive about Ultravox. Don't let the edges get blurred too much here. And to suddenly realise I took Ultravox far more seriously. But I mean, that's not a bad thing. I mean, Visage was a fun thing. Don't mean in anything bad to Visage. But it was a little bit like, couldn't the wheels of business just accommodate a bit of breathing space here, you know? Because we were a mad touring band. I mean, really, we just, you know, we loved to tour. And Visage wasn't a touring band, and that caused a little bit of problems, because I think Steve wanted to, really. But that was always discussed that it wouldn't. He would do tour promotional things in front of about 60,000 people, just going on stage and singing along to the backing track or whatever. It was just a shock that it all happened at once, and it was a case of like, okay, the climate is a bit like, go for it, don't complicate it, don't whinge about it. But it just had a touch of like, by the time I did the Visage album, I was getting a bit tired, knackered, you know. It was, and we were preparing the tour. We had to think about all that for Ultravox, and we were going on a really long tour, you know, about five months, not that long, around the world. So sometimes the Visage thing, that a bit of antagonism came in, say, because the two things were running neck and neck, you know. And I just don't think the second Visage album was very good. It was a case of having to match two good albums. I think they were both excellent, happy album from the Visage, and a very energetic first album for that Ultravox lineup. So, but you can imagine we had a lot on our plate. It was a lot of responsibility, because quite often the second album is a hard one. You know, it's like you don't have the same naive excitement, you know. And like I say, with Visage, and you're just there in a studio, you know. And then with Ultravox, like I said, we didn't have that going off and trying out songs. We always actually did live, you know. We did that in the 70s. We'd always be trying out one or two new tracks with John Fox period. You know, when punters came along, they always knew they were going to hear a version of some new track.
Was Ultravox more a band than Visage?
Yeah, oh yeah, it definitely was. Right from the start, it was agreed that Visage would be a studio project. But I mean, you just can't knock it. I mean, it was like we thought they just both really took off big time, you know. So you can't. But like I say, it's just sometimes you would like. I was on Chrysalis. Me and Midge was on Chrysalis. The management ran both bands, our management, and Polydor was next door. Although we were signed to Polydor America, and actually that got up Polydor's nose a little bit because we did well everywhere except America with Visage. I mean, really well, you know. So it was quite a very, very interesting and quite unusual situation, I think, for a musician to be in, you know.
Sure, and obviously two projects running along at the same time. How are you deciding which material went where?
Yeah, that... the thing is, I didn't really preempt anything much with the Ultravox one. I wanted it to just come out of what we were doing at the time. And I can honestly say that I was quite empty of ideas. I usually had ideas kicking around. Yeah, at that time, how did I sort the two out? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we just said a minute ago that you kind of Ultravox was your main concern, your main concentration. You say better stuff or the stuff, and then Visage.
No, it wasn't a case of better or better stuff. It was. It wasn't. I can. If I think back now, it's a long time ago. That I was fairly devoid of ideas, but I didn't actually mind that because it was fresh. I mean, what the first thing I did with Visage was we wrote Night Train, and I was very influential on that. And it was a case of like, right, okay, we're in a good studio now, finally. Let's me, Barry Adamson, and Dave Formula, you know, and Rusty. Let's get something really going here. And we got the backing track for Night Train. And I came up with the riff, da, da, da. That was actually me wanting to get more into a dancey sort of vibe. And so that was very exciting. It's a case of like sometimes when you do that, you have to move yourself and do different ideas, you know. So that was a real buzz. But also I found myself going into areas where I felt like I was repeating myself a little bit, because I think I can admit that I was a bit slightly devoid of ideas sometimes. And I just remember some riffs that went on the album, because you've got to remember we'd done an Ultravox album. They weren't easy coming for that album. It became a bit hard work. I know for a fact that Midge had some ideas cooking there that he just kept, which we knew would be okay for Visage. You know, some songy sort of, like The Horseman or something like that, guitar-orientated stuff that he knew not to present it to the Ultravox thing. But even then, you know, that is hard work. Sometimes you think, shit, I wish I was just in one band. Because, you know, it tends to put me and Midge too much in each other's pockets. Maybe it could have been good for Ultravox. Do you know what I mean? It tends to make you compartmentalise yourselves, and me and him are thinking not just about Ultravox, but you've got this other little world there, you know, and you start second-guessing each other too early, you know. I mean, you know what I mean?
Once
like,
picked you up, you made, you know, Vienna was big, you know, you were going. And why didn't you jump Visage? Why didn't you say, right, okay, we're going to concentrate on that?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, don't really know. I was up for it. I suppose I was kind of on board, really. No, I mean, it didn't really cross my mind because I liked it. I liked it. I liked the feel of it, everything. I liked the fun of it, and I thought we would have that fun again, and we did to a certain extent.
You mentioned earlier that
but unfortunately, looking back, it just only lasted 2 albums, you know. I mean, Midge did actually quit, and I did carry on and did one more. So, you know, I am my own mind. You know, just because Midge quit, it didn't mean I'm going to quit as well, you know. But it just wasn't quite the same, you know. I did that track Pleasure Boys, you know, and did another one that we didn't quite get out.
You mentioned earlier about Ultravox, you're splitting it, it's a democratic process, you split the money always.
Mm-hmm.
Fade to Grey, you know, that was not split.
No.
Explain why.
That again, I mean, you know, the guys were, when we were doing the Visage album at South Moulton Street, there's a tiny little studio there, Mayfair, before they moved up to the bigger studio. They were just stuck for lacking ideas. We were getting to the point where we had to get this album done, you know, and we need some more songs. So I just brought that one in. And that was it really, out of their necessity and need to have more material. I don't know why we didn't put Tar on again, but we didn't, on the album, you know. It was a case of bring it in, but unfortunately, fellas, you know, you've got to accept that Said Sharpley and Chris Payne wrote this, and Midge actually did the final touch for that when he put the vocals on it. So that was split, you know, in threes.
You got credit on that, haven't you?
Oh yeah, certainly did. No, we split it. We got thirds. I mean, it's me and that was the deal. I mean, I brought it in, and if Midge did the vocals on it, which I knew he was capable of by then, because it was going nowhere. It was just this backing track with a groove. I called it something else. I won't say what I called it. You know, it was like this groove thing, which we were just having a laugh to, dancing around the studio, you know, at Martin Rush's place. And it was like, right, come on, let's do something in this. It's got a great vibe to it. So Midge, we split it 3 ways. Midge had a third, I had a third, and the other 2 guys split theirs with a third. Said Sharpley and Chris Payne. Which was okay, but I mean, of course, that was a fantastic success, you know, and it's not always a recipe for a happy band, is it? But, you know, I think you just got to accept that if you're short of ideas, you know, you can't sort of backtrack on it later. I don't think anybody did, to be honest, you know.
But Visage and Scene is very much obviously a collective, but Rusty and Steve, a key part of it. Yet the biggest hit, they weren't part of the right.
Mm.
You know, they didn't write.
Yeah. Funny old world. No, it's, what can you say, you know, it's, they were, to a certain extent, headhunting for musical side of things. Rusty was a big fan, and Steve was, of Systems of Romance. They knew we'd got something, and I came along and delivered. And if they were short of something, I came on and gave them that. So, there we go, you know, that's it. It's business, isn't it? I'm a cow, aren't I? No, I mean,
that's fine. No, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So let's go back to Ultravox. Tell us a little bit about After Vienna, All Stood Still and The Thin Wall. How did those 2 tracks come about?
Sorry, could you just say that one again? Sorry.
Obviously, After Vienna was a big hit, and then you released 2 other singles. Just tell us a little bit about how they came about, you know, the writing process.
For Thin Wall and stuff. And which ones, other ones that you mean? All Stood Still was on the Vienna album. All Stood Still was one that was definitely one of the early mid-tempo ones that we did. Yeah, when we first started rehearsing with Midge earlier on. That was a very much like an equal, everybody contributing at once and quite fired up, you know, it was a good, and with the repeating backing vocal thing as well, you know, answering thing. It was a real group vibe, you know. Like I said, when we did Rage in Eden, it was actually really a strange atmosphere. I mean, we veered more to the electronic with the Thin Wall, and more sterile, you know, atmosphere, cold vibe of it was more of an album. I mean, Vienna was really bringing the vibe in from playing live. We just banged them down like we were playing live, whereas this one was quite calculated. And as I remember, Connie, I heard through a friend who used to come up, and the local German guys that used to come, musicians, like the guy from Cannes, Olga Shukai and stuff, he said that when we left, he said that this album was literally to get every drum beat, every note, drag it out, polish it, you know, and he was like, thank God they've gone, you know what I mean? It was quite a heavy album, you know, it was an intense album. And to give an example of the Thin Wall, I wrote the backing music for that, apart from Midge came up with the guitar riff. We hadn't got much. We used to get jam, you know. We used to keep that jam sort of vibe, and the guitar riff came from a jam, you know, and he plonked that on there. And I quite like Thin Wall, but it's definitely got the feeling of like being quite sort of like you go here, you go there, and quite often drum machines used to do that sometimes. Used to sometimes take the dynamics out of it, and you found yourself having to work harder to change things. You know, your chords have to be even more obvious to do something with it, and you know, I mean, like I say, it was quite a hard. There was one track from that which was happily titled Death in the Afternoon. Sorry, excuse me. It was a long time ago. I was well pleased when it was titled that. Now, I had this lovely, this melody, which I'd actually had from doing the demos for Systems of Romance. I worked at home on a Revox 4-track, and there was one melody, that was the melody used from there, so I had some ammunition to use from the past.
What did you think?
But like I say, overall, it's really hard for me to get into the album now, because it's like it was an interesting album. I'd still like the album, you know, because we were slightly short of ideas of songs. It was a case of, on the second side, I steamed in and actually wrote this instrumental bit. It was a bit like, you know, when everyone's a bit, quite often, because like I said, it was definitely a move to the right. Sometimes it was like I had people looking over my shoulder, but I was waving the flag of music. But sometimes it was a bit disheartening to have vocals over everything sometimes, you know. It was the climate, you know, it was back to songs, wasn't it, you know, and stop messing about. But I remember enjoying writing this thing called Ascent on the B-side of the album, you know, when they had vinyl 400 years ago.
What did you think?
Sorry, Mark, I'm just going to have to change the Yeah, camera's spinning.
Okay, just talk about after Vienna. You just said that the next album, you know, Rage Vegan was awkward, difficult one. Explain a bit about that.
It was quite difficult because I think we kind of clammed up a little bit, you know. We had to do it now. And now was when Vienna was high in the charts, so we wanted to enjoy ourselves, basically go out and party. But we couldn't, we were there. No real... It kind of made us clam up a little bit. And we also knew that we had to do another Visage album, you know, and... but like, it's kind of, you know, you can't blame anything for that. I mean, I was there hanging out early 1979, for something like Visage. It came along, it was great, and it was great, really good fun, and it did a lot for me, you know, just to get out of that depression. It was really good fun, and you can't sort of then a year later, 2 years later, start sort of, you've just got to go with it. I mean, it was a bit like you're on board, so go for it, but it didn't help that the Ultravox album was hard work. It was a pure studio album. We were in the studio in Germany for 3 months, so we're right out in the country, with trying to get these ideas for an album in winter. The Visage and Ultravox are at the top of the charts all over the place, and we can't party. So you know, it's a slight distraction, and we are there to work, and. It was a quite cold, strange album.
When did Mitch start making solo records?
He started. I think he did his first solo single in Slick. I don't know. Just when he. I think No Regrets.
Why did you do that?
I don't know.
Was it
I did it.
What did the other band think of it?
I don't know.
You must have had I mean, between the three of you, you must have had an opinion.
We thought No Regrets was quite a good single, you know, it was okay.
Were you surprised were you surprised at this?
Sorry?
Were you surprised at
No, I mean, really, I mean, it's not... it was just like a one-off loose thing. I don't know. I mean, you should talk to Mitch about that.
I mean, what about when Lament came about? Had the relationship within the band changed?
When...
Lament?
Lament? Yeah, it had. I mean, we... Like I said, we'd done... it was a hard album to do, Rage and Eden, and it actually did take its toll on the band a little bit. But we did a big tour after that, 4.5, 5 months. That cleared the cobwebs out, and we quite enjoyed it, you know. So when we came back to do Quartet, I think Quartet's quite a good album. We just had a change. We did it. It was produced by George Martin, engineered by Jeff Emmerich, and it was kind of like, yeah, you know, we were really up for it. And there's much more of a balance of electronics and live work, because I think that injection of quite a big tour got us back into playing again, you know. Like, I remember him, it was just a big vibe straight away and a burst of energy, and I think on Rage and Eden we seemed to kind of lack that a little bit, you know. But like you said, when we got to Lament, yeah, we were, it was a bit like we'd kind of been around this spectrum, which was Ultravox, and quite a lot of it was from what we'd built up over the 70s. And we dipped into it, and it had started to get a bit like a carcass that didn't have any more ideas there. And we were just getting a little bit tired, because at the end, well, like you do, you know, you just get tired. We were on like a treadmill. And like I say, I think sometimes if just the business had maybe just backed off us a little bit, it might have been a bit better. But it wasn't that time, was it? You know, it was like, just go for it. And we'd done a very long tour with Quartet. It was about 7 months, actually. And me and Warren in particular were up for trying to do something in the States for that one. We were really wanting to bring this music that we'd done and hopefully get people in the States into it. It would almost be like a full achievement from the 70s of like ignoring the States and trying to do our own thing and then take it back to them. But that so-called British invasion that happened in 1983, we were only sort of not quite on it, really. We were sort of on it, but not quite. Like we were in the top, got about up to number 62 or something. And that was disappointing. And as you can tell from what I've talked to you about the past, it's like we were affected by things like that. I was actually. You know, I wanted to do something in the States. So when we came to do the Lament album, it was a little bit, you know, I was actually up for it, you know, but you know, it's just not a great atmosphere, you know.
The dynamics of the band changed.
Sorry?
Have the dynamics within the band changed?
Dynamics. I think what we did for the Lament, we just got darker and more austere, and not quite as sugary as the Quartet one was. Not as commercial, just darker generally. Even the stage set was black, you know. It was just generally a darker image. Some of the stuff I quite like. It felt a little bit like we need an injection of origination of ideas. And it wasn't very forthcoming, and what we tended to blame each other a little bit. I didn't, of course. You know, that's why I'm wearing this white shirt. But it was a little bit like that, drumming it down a little bit, you know. And it wasn't helpful at the time. I think we'd have been better off just being a bit better with each other, you know. But it's definitely a case of like you're living in each other's pockets, you know, the old rock and roll story.
Did Mitch go and solo the track from the kind of camaraderie?
Sorry?
Did Mitch solo the track from the camaraderie of the band?
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that? 'Cause as I said, you won't hear my voice, all you hear is yeah.
Well, I was quite up for it, but because, okay, if you've got the energy, go for it, you know. But I really felt that it was a bit kind of opportunistic in a way, because I think it would have been better if we wanted Ultravox to carry on, and I was beginning to think then that Midge didn't really, he was more interested in his own thing. It would have been better for us all to actually take a break, including him, because he never... Yeah, let's go. And it was the beginning of the end. But it was kind of engineered a bit like that. I mean, I knew that was looming round the corner. And it's a classic case of that band's done 3 albums now. They're on the 4th. Let's get the Greatest Hits album out. But I didn't realise at the time. I mean, I was pretty green. I was just kind of up for it. I mean, I was pretty much that kind of a guy. And I would have gone on and on to the end. I was a bit like that, you know. And even when the band broke up, when we did that rubbish album, Uvox, when Midge was tired and didn't really want to do it, and it was, you know, we ended up kicking Warren out, which was something. All these things happened because we didn't stop. We just hadn't got that about us to just say, hey, come on, let's just respect each other a bit. We're knackered, you know. And then, but I was the kind of guy that would tend to go on and on and on, and I was definitely a bit like, well, I've got loads of ideas, you know, because I did a solo album when it all fell apart in about 1987, and they weren't very easy to come, but it's full of ideas, you know. So, you know, it's like we just needed to just, but that's the problem, as I'm sure when you spoke to other people, the nature of it is that you're living in each other's pockets, you know, and you just get sick of each other, really, you know what I mean?
Going back to
in a slightly irrational way, you know.
Sure. If I could take you back a little bit. The men came out. You say it's not the, you know, quite the atmosphere that it was. However, you know, Dancing with Tears in My Eyes.
Yeah, it was good. Well, I'm Mr. Know-It-All, basically. I mean, when it first happened, Midge, because there was a carcass there. Instead of kind of all clubbing together and let's try and do something, come up with a difference, Midge was rather blaming. He did drum it down a little bit and put it in such a way which was like, I think the first day of the rehearsals was he sort of said pretty much, he's sick of my ideas, sick of my playing. I mean, these things happen, you know, I mean, God, you know, and I just took that as a pinch of salt. It's just like, yeah, sure, you know, why are you here? And I ended up writing that track, so, you know, there we go.
Lyrically, where did that come from?
Because you see, I knew we were at that stage where it's a time to recapitulate and pull in what you've got. Of course you need to get new ideas, but don't let's crack up over it. There's also some of the stuff, the traditional Ultravox, I know that's a dangerous word, isn't it? But it was a little bit. Let's back it up with some of that as well. And I remember writing that. It crept in a little bit where we started writing things in at home and bringing it in, you know, which was seriously annoying. No, but I used to write. I wrote that at home. Dun, 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 dun. And it was influenced from a German guy called Michael Rother, who used to be in Cluster, I think. This is from Connie Plank, you know. And he did this guitar album with these very kind of it was quite static, whereas ours is much more anthemic. But it's the same kind of thing of slightly strange crossover between classical and rock. Like only the Germans could do it. It was like, this is weird, this is. But then we did it, and in such a way, and it just dropped out easy. You know, you can tell. I mean, we couldn't see the wood for the trees then at all. And again, it took someone like Chris Wright from Chrysalis to say, that's the one. You know.
What about...
Sorry, just stop. We're just about to get booked on the...
Okay. That's right.
Bear with us, I'll just go...
Sure, yeah.
In a way, did that spend the end for you, Midge's, you know, went off?
Well, no, it wouldn't have done. Again, I mean, I'm a reasonable chap, honest, you know.
Yeah.
Probably too reasonable, you know, too nice a bloke. But obviously, I mean, I was not stupid. I mean, I was quite... But it was a little bit of... I think it was the way me and Warren were sort of snubbed publicly in Band Aid. I found that a bit of a nasty thing to do. And it smacked a little bit of two... Bob used to come to Midge's parties and stuff, you know, and they used to separate themselves. It was all going a little bit pear-shaped, and Bob was frustrated about his solo career doing nothing. Obviously, Midge was doing fantastic, but it's probably time to leave the band. You know, I think he was getting in his ear a bit. Well, he was. And but there again, it was these things happen for a reason. You know, I mean, I was absolutely shattered as well. You know, I was wanting to do that Lament album, but I was also a bit of a head case at the time. I was getting a bit worn out by it all. But it kind of did a bit, really, because, I mean, I kept it inside, and Warren did. And but it was like, hey, come on, you know, shit, you know, let's get upset about it. But it did feel a bit like, well, Christ, if Bob Geldof can invite all his band and there's all Spandau Ballet there, why didn't you invite us, you know? I'd only pretend to sing, because I remember the night before at Band Aid, we were coming back from somewhere on the plane. I was sat next to Midge. He told me about it, and I just jokingly said, you need a keyboard player. And I think that the ruling was that he wanted people there to sing, but that's bullshit, innit? But I mean, you know, you just got to go with it, haven't you? It was a fantastic thing. I mean, when we were invited to do Live Aid, I mean, at the end of the day, it was all down to Ultravox, wasn't it? To go there and do its thing. It was hard to do it slightly under pressure. We had a feeling it was the end, but you couldn't say that. You couldn't. I'm the last kind of person. You can talk to Chris Morrison about this. I mean, I was a bit of a space cadet and a bit out of order sometimes, like, you know, stirring it. But I'm also the person that I'm not vindictive. I will support. I supported Midge. In fact, when we went on stage, we were stood at the side looking on the monitor before we went on, and I supported the guy. You know, I felt like that. But even then, because it was our band, it felt a bit strange. You know, but it was a massive thing to. You couldn't start getting. You just had to go with it, because it was supposedly about feeding starving people, wasn't it? You know.
Ultravox are huge. You know, they're a huge time span really for a band. But they're now, when you look back in 1998, retrospectively, they're lumped into the New Romantic movement. How do you feel about that?
Well, now I don't really care. It's kind of was what it was. A little bit niggled, because I think people who didn't know us or didn't come to see us live. I've met a few people like that. You know, they tend to talk to you about it, and you say, well, did you ever come and see us live? And you can tell they haven't, because we were quite a live band, lots of energy. And so was Midge. You know, Midge had it, otherwise we wouldn't have had him in the band. It was like power, enjoying it, and electronics mixing together. And we had a really good time on stage. In other words, I'm just saying, like, New Romantic band, it doesn't really quite fit, really, you know, if you saw us performing. It's just also we weren't a Simple Minds. We didn't go into that blues-based stuff. Stadium either. It was structured, so in some ways I think people may have passed on us, not come to see us live, thinking it was a bit trite, but it was far from that. I mean, it was very much over the top power, and you know, really going for it. It wasn't trite little electronic drums. That's what I'm saying. You know.
What do you think of New Romantic? What does that mean to you?
Well, I don't actually mind the word New Romantic now. I don't mind romantic. At the time, it really got up my nose. You see, in some ways, I'm slightly proud of it, because all that work that I did up to it actually had some effect on people to start these kind of bands, which were, after all down to me. No, it was, you know, I was playing touch-sensitive keyboards that were totally polyphonic, which they don't even make now, and they never did since then, like the CS80, where you can actually play a chord and roll onto certain notes. Now, you couldn't get more romantic than that, you know what I mean? But I used to do it in a way which was, again, quite powerful. And of course, I used to play the synthesizer with emotion, with vibrato, coming from aggression through the punk movement. So it was romantic. I mean, you know, epic and romantic. But you can even say that about John Foxx's vocals. That's one of the reasons why I loved the band. He could be very acid-toned, but he could also, like, sing a ballad, sorry, not a ballad, like a love song, like Hiroshima Mon Amour, which was about two people being blown to bits. You know, acid-tongued, but very heartfelt, you know.
But the New Romantic movement sprung out those two clubs, Billy's and Blitz. I mean,
sorry, just like that last answer. Just whack the mic.
Oh, sorry.
A crucial bit.
Yeah.
I'll be all right that last bit.
Sorry.
But going through that Billies and Blitz, which is where the New Romantic scene emerged from, they were playing Ultravox's records in that club. Do you feel responsible in a way for that scene? To a degree?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, of course, we keep forgetting about the Club for Heroes. I mean, we were on tour so much that I missed most of this scene. You know, this is what we've got to remember. And I was probably one of the few people that was allowed in the Blitz wearing jeans and leather jacket, you know. Because Steve used to let me in. Oh, yeah, you've been rehearsing, you know. And, you know, of course, he wouldn't let other people in like that. But Club for Heroes, I remember getting there, because I used to go after in between tours. We did Workaholics, that was the name at the time. We were responsible for it. Yeah, we put kind of a style and an attitude actually first. Yeah, I mean, you can actually trace that right back to, I think, where John was thinking, John Fox, with the way he sang something like Quiet Man. It was kind of a certain style.
Could you actually use that phrase, in my Billy, just saying that I think we were, in a way, responsible for that, and use the phrase New Romantic, because if you do think that, because obviously you're not going to hear me say that, and it's just kind of crystal.
Well, of course we were. I mean, we were there. I mean, I don't mind that. I made a mark. That's what I wanted to do by putting in my. I left music college, got a place at the Royal Academy of Music, turned it down, thought I was crazy, you know, and eventually got somewhere and really managed. After being learning how to improvise, I managed to get into a situation where I could influence, and a lot of that influence came from me. You know, it's like the way I played keyboards was in a emotional way, putting your whole emotion into it. Even when we were doing really hard, heavy stuff, you know, it was piercing and intense, and close to romantic, and emotional. So and to play the synthesizer in the middle of the punk movement in a way which was like a violin, in other words, with this vibrato sound, you know, wobbling sort of, but through. That's emotional, it's romantic. So, yeah, I don't. I was definitely responsible for a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, that New Romantic term. How do you sum up that?
I actually like I must say I sat with the futurist term a little bit easier, you know, because that was about technology and looking forward and coming and thinking about almost science fiction. It was positive, and it moved into that. I mean, you know, with the likes of Gary Newman, the sort of spaceman leader sort of image, using technology, you know, and it was like coming into that thing instead of. I don't know, coming to the beginning of the 80s, it was, and I think I didn't sit happy with the title at the time, because it's just this thing where you get. I think Midge didn't sit happy with it because he had first-hand experience of being the flavour of the month with Slick. He was a bit shiftier about it than me. I was a bit more naive, probably in some ways, but I was also a little bit thinking we would win through anyway, because I'd been more in the developing band thing, you know, where you put your arm around it, you know, we could live through it and develop and all that. I think he was more worried about it, you know, because you think one flavour of the month 1 minute, next minute when people are slagging that off, it's like finished.
You're now seen as a New Romantic band. How does it feel?
It doesn't. It feels. It's okay, don't mind. A lot of people who like Ultravox don't really think of it like that. You know, I think it's the people who don't know. It might influence them from not being quite aware of getting hold of the albums and turning them up loud and having a really good listen, or listening to them at 4 o'clock in the morning with headphones on, you know, I mean, because it's got that as well, you know. Again, that's the only reservation I have, to think that it's some sugar-coated little trend.
Again, you're ahead of your time, weren't you? You're New Romantics or Futurists or whatever you want to call it before.
We just pointed a way out of what the punk thing had done. The punk thing did a great job and we subscribed to it, but then straight away, because we'd been around for 3 years and we were aware of these bands that were coming together in London, you know, we were beavering away on other things, you know. But it's just strange how it all worked out, isn't it? You know, because we just at the end of the day, after doing 3 albums, if you don't get in the top 40, well, you rightfully get dropped, I suppose.
How would you sum up your input into the New Romantic movement?
It's definitely just, we knew how to put emotion, a different kind of emotion, other than aggression, and into music. We created our own style of music. That's what's really important. Bringing in some emotions from the classical world. But we mix them well, because we spent a lot of time on them, you know.
What does that phrase mean to you?
New Romantic, I tell you, it means absolutely nothing. It means nothing to me. It means absolutely nothing at all. It's kind of so long ago now, you know. I like the word romantic, and that's it.
How would you sum up that period in popular culture?
It's definitely aspiring, going for it, positive. And then, this is the thing, very soon with New Romantic it became a little bit decadent and a bit cheesy. So that's why I'm slightly reserved to get too involved in that. Whereas we then sort of came a little bit away and got harder again and colder, you know, sort of made our own statement. You know,
Okay.
I can't remember what I said. Sorry.
Couple of other, just finally, Ultravox, when people look back, how would you like them to be remembered? I'd like them to be remembered. So am I underplaying it? Obviously, you left a massive impact. People, it's their first song they bought.
Sorry, I'm not to be very helpful here, because it's a long time ago. Obviously, it's a big part of my whole life. Everybody who's been in the band has got to admit that. I'd just like to be remembered for coming up with something original, actually. Original kind of music, which is what we set out to do. Because the other time wasn't my time. I was too young to be a hippie, you know. Thank God I'm still alive. No, you know, so I accomplished, and I just want people to remember Ultravox as being something, a band that successfully made their own kind of music.
And finally, what about Vienna? I mean,
Oh, sorry, just to elaborate on that, to make a different kind of music than what went before. Just the main thing is to make your own music, to draw from influences that are closer, you know, not putting down the blues scale and drawing from America. That was brilliant, you know. I mean, it comes to improvising, you know, not to put that down, because we took that on board a bit as well. But it's just to draw from things closer to home and make your own kind of music, you know.
Okay, as I said, a couple more things. Ultravox, you say, kind of moved away from that New Romantic band, but Visage were the archetypal New Romantic.
Yeah, we were. We made no bones about it, you know.
Just elaborate on that.
Well, that was just fun and style and doing something for the club, always dance orientated, which was different for me. It was, and that when you've got a groove going that's dance orientated, it just keeps you up when you're doing the album. You know, it can also be seriously irritating as well, but you know, it just keeps you up, and you just do different kind of writing to it. It was for the club. I mean, like I say, it was definitely DJ led, and it was for style, it was for fun, and you know, some of the melodies and stuff from the synthesizer things did come over kind of slightly trite and cliche at first. You know, you know, the way they used to come out on our albums, you know. But
Visage were a New Romantic band, weren't they?
Pardon?
Visage were the New Romantic
Yeah,
band.
definitely.
Why?
They started it off.
How did it?
They started it off, and then the Blitz thing appeared, and then that was ripe for a band like Spandau Ballet to step in, and it was a great showcase for them, you know.
How did they create that scene? You know, how did they?
Sorry?
How did they? What was New Romantic? What did they try and do? What was their?
I don't know. I just wrote the music. They just tried to lift people, really. I think to not be scared about doing dance, not scared about doing just fun stuff, energetic. Take the energy from the punk thing, and it was a little bit of a celebration of, like, we have actually got some of our own music now. So what the punks were complaining about, you know, what are they complaining about anymore? I mean, of course there are other things, the political side of the punk movement, but I mean, we have got our own music now. Let's celebrate it.
I find it, you know, Vienna is one of the biggest songs in the makeup of musically singles over the past, you know, 20 or so years. How does that make you feel?
Which one, sorry?
Vienna.
Vienna. I don't know that one. Only joking. I'm very proud of it. I really am. You know, I mean, I'm proud. I mean, sometimes it just seems like it's a different. It's not even me. It's kind of. It's kind of odd, really. Very proud of it.
I mean, you're very influential with other people. It must be a massive achievement.
Yeah, it is. I think because it is absolutely is. It's because I'm kind of centred my energy now on composing. I try and keep to the present time quite a lot. And you know, it's hard for me to just revert back because I'm a composer now, writing music as we speak.
Sure.
I try not to get involved in it too much because you can find it cropping up into your head and you start writing like it and stuff. You have to kind of dislocate yourself from it, you know.
When you do look back on a nostalgic moment, how does it make you feel?
Well, I feel really good. I mean, it's like, it seems like another time because it was so weird at the time. It was absolutely amazing. And like I say, from just the conversation, things were going at such a breakneck speed. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. I accomplished what I set out to do, which was absolutely, that's the main thing. It would have been a terrible state of affairs for someone like me to have gone like that when Richard Griffiths gave me that £100, you know. But I was lucky, you know, and it makes me feel very pleased that I succeeded. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, really, and so I would have liked it to have gone on and on and on and on, you know. I'm a little bit I'm not an easy person when things end. I still like to have thought that it could have carried on. We seem to suffer a little bit, symptomatic of going down with the ship, you know. But I try not to think about that. I try to think positive, because I'm such a kind of a bravado, on and on forever kind of person, you know, that like what you just said, you've got to think about the positive things, and we succeeded, you know.
Thanks. That's fantastic. Thanks, Billy.